The alarm blared through the corridors of the space station, its sharp sound cutting through the usual hum of activity. Red lights flashed on the walls, bathing everything in an eerie glow. People and aliens alike scrambled to safety, their faces filled with panic. In the middle of the chaos, a massive fire had broken out in one of the most critical parts of the station, the central fusion reactor. If the fire wasn't stopped soon, it would spread and destroy the entire colony, leaving no survivors. The firefighters stationed at the scene were frozen in place. They came from different species across the galaxy, each trained for emergencies like this. But now, none of them moved. Some stared wide-eyed at the flames roaring inside the reactor chamber, while others whispered prayers or curses in their native languages. No one stepped forward. Fear gripped them all, paralyzing even the bravest among them. But then, someone did move. From the edge of the crowd, a human named Jake Miller pushed his way through. He was tall and muscular, with short brown hair and a determined look in his blue eyes. His face was calm, almost too calm for the situation. Around him, people muttered nervously, wondering what he was doing. Was he crazy? Did he not see how dangerous it was? Jake ignored the whispers as he approached the entrance to the burning reactor. He glanced back at Lara, an alien engineer who often worked alongside him. Her green skin shimmered faintly under the red emergency lights, and her large, dark eyes were filled with worry. "Jake, don't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's suicide." He shook his head. "Someone has to stop it," he replied simply. "If I don't go, who will?" Before she could argue further, Jake turned away and began suiting up. The firefighting gear was bulky and designed to withstand extreme heat, but it wouldn't protect him forever. He checked the oxygen tank strapped to his back and tightened the straps on his helmet. Every movement was deliberate, showing years of experience. As he prepared, a young woman with a camera hovered nearby, watching him closely. Her name was Mia Harper, and she was a journalist covering the crisis. She had been sent to document the event, but something about Jake caught her attention. There was something different about him, something compelling. Around them, the other firefighters still hadn't moved. Aliens with multiple arms, glowing skin, or insect-like features stood rooted to the spot, unable to act. Some whispered that humans were reckless, driven by emotions rather than logic. Others admired Jake's bravery, though they couldn't bring themselves to join him. It was clear that no one else would step up. Finally, Jake finished suiting up. He took a deep breath, adjusted his helmet one last time, and walked toward the open doorway leading into the inferno. The heat hit him immediately, intense and suffocating. Flames danced wildly inside the reactor chamber, consuming everything in their path. For a moment, even Jake hesitated. Then, without looking back, he stepped inside. As the door closed behind him, the crowd outside fell silent. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Lyra covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. Maya lowered her camera, feeling a lump form in her throat. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Jake Miller had just become the only hope for thousands of lives, and possibly the entire colony itself. Jake moved carefully through the burning reactor chamber, his boots crunching on fragments of melted metal and debris. The air inside was thick with smoke, and the heat pressed against him like a heavy blanket, even through his protective suit. His helmet's visor automatically adjusted to filter out the intense brightness of the flames, but nothing could block the roar of the fire. It sounded alive, almost angry, as if it knew Jake was there to stop it. Outside, the crowd watched anxiously on monitors that displayed live footage from Jake's helmet camera. The images were shaky and distorted by the smoke, but they showed enough to make everyone uneasy. Flames licked at walls made of reinforced alloy, turning them red-hot in seconds. Sparks flew everywhere, and strange shadows danced across the screen. Some people turned away, unable to watch, while others whispered prayers for Jake's safety. Mia Harper stood near the front of the crowd, her camera held tightly in her hands. She wasn't filming anymore. She couldn't. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. Jake was just one man, a human surrounded by aliens who were far stronger, faster, and more advanced than him. Yet here he was, walking into a disaster that terrified even them. Why? What drove someone to take such a risk? Mia had covered plenty of stories before, but none like this. This felt different, deeper. She wanted to understand. Lyra, the alien engineer, hovered nearby, her large eyes fixed on the monitor. She wrung her hands nervously, her green skin paler than usual. He shouldn't be doing this, she murmured to no one in particular. It's too dangerous. Several aliens nodded in agreement, though they avoided meeting her gaze. They felt guilty, ashamed even, for not stepping up themselves. But fear had rooted them to the spot, and now all they could do was wait. Back inside the reactor, Jake focused on staying calm. He knew panic would only make things worse. His training kicked in as he scanned the area, looking for anything that could help him contain the blaze. The fire seemed to have a life of its own, spreading unpredictably and consuming everything in its path. It didn't behave like a normal fire. It was almost unnatural. Jake frowned behind his visor. Something about it didn't add up. As he moved deeper into the chamber, he noticed something strange scattered across the floor, small pieces of an unfamiliar alloy. They glinted faintly in the flickering light, catching his attention. Jake knelt down to examine them more closely. The material wasn't part of the reactor's original design. It looked alien, possibly from another planet or species. He picked up a shard and turned it over in his gloved hand, his brow furrowing. Sabotage. Was this fire caused deliberately? Outside, Mia noticed the change in Jake's movements on the monitor. He had stopped moving and seemed to be examining something on the ground. Curious, she leaned closer to the screen. Whatever it was, it clearly troubled him. She glanced at Lyra, who was still watching intently. "Do you know what he's looking at?" Maya asked quietly. Lyra shook her head. "I don't know," she admitted. "But if it's not part of the reactor, then—" She trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. The implications were too frightening. Meanwhile, Jake pocketed the shard and stood up. If someone had sabotaged the reactor, he needed answers, and fast. But first, he had to focus on stopping the fire. Taking a deep breath, he adjusted his oxygen tank and pressed forward. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the inferno, where the flames burned brightest and hottest. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cooling system in his suit, and his muscles ached from the effort of moving against the oppressive heat. Back outside, the tension grew thicker with every passing second. Aliens muttered among themselves, speculating about what might happen next. Some blamed humanity for the disaster, claiming it was inevitable given how reckless humans were. Others argued that Jake's actions proved otherwise, that humans could be brave when it mattered most. Maya listened to their arguments silently, jotting notes in her notebook. She realized this story wasn't just about a fire anymore. It was about courage, sacrifice, and the fragile bond between species trying to coexist in a vast and dangerous universe. And at the center of it all was Jake Miller, alone in the inferno, fighting not just for survival, but for the future of everyone on the station. Jake pushed deeper into the reactor, his every step heavy and deliberate. The fire raged around him, consuming everything it touched. Sparks flew like tiny stars, and the heat was so intense that even his advanced suit struggled to keep up. His breathing grew labored, not from fear, but from the effort of moving through such a hostile environment. Every movement required focus, every decision carried weight. One wrong step could mean disaster, not just for him, but for everyone on the station. The flames seemed to twist and turn in unnatural ways, almost as if they were alive. They didn't behave like ordinary fires. Instead of spreading evenly, they surged forward in bursts, targeting specific areas of the reactor. Jake's instincts told him this wasn't random. Someone, or something, had set this blaze intentionally. The shard of alien alloy he found earlier weighed heavily in his pocket, both literally and figuratively. It was proof that this wasn't an accident. But who would do this? And why? As he moved closer to the core of the reactor, Jake spotted something unusual. A control panel partially melted by the flames. Its surface was blackened and cracked, but parts of it still glowed faintly. He knelt down to examine it, brushing away debris with his gloved hand. The screen flickered weakly, displaying fragments of data in a language he didn't recognize. Alien symbols scrolled across the display, too fast for him to read. Frustrated, Jake pulled out a small handheld scanner from his belt and connected it to the panel. The device hummed softly as it began decoding the information. Outside, the crowd gathered around the monitors watched anxiously. The footage from Jake's helmet camera showed glimpses of what he was doing, though much of it was obscured by smoke and flames. Maya Harper stood near the front, her eyes glued to the screen. She noticed how methodical Jake was, how calm he remained despite the chaos surrounding him. It struck her that his actions weren't driven by recklessness, as some had claimed, but by careful thought and years of experience. He wasn't just running into danger blindly, he was working to solve the problem. Lyra, the alien engineer, leaned over Maya's shoulder, trying to make sense of the images on the screen. "What is he doing now?" she asked nervously. "He's checking a control panel," Maya replied, pointing to the flickering screen. "Looks like he's trying to figure out what caused the fire." Lyra frowned. "If someone tampered with the reactor, we need to know who. This isn't just about stopping the fire, it's about finding the truth." Mia nodded, her mind racing. If sabotage was involved, then the implications went far beyond this one incident. Was this an isolated attack, or part of something bigger? She glanced at the crowd, noticing how divided they seemed. Some aliens whispered angrily about humans, blaming them for the disaster. Others defended Jake, praising his bravery. Tensions were high, and Mia worried that if the truth didn't come out soon, it could tear the colony apart. Back inside the reactor, Jake's scanner beeped softly, signaling that it had finished decoding the data. He squinted at the translated text, which revealed a series of commands sent to the reactor moments before the fire started. Someone had deliberately overridden the safety protocols, disabling the automatic shut-off systems meant to prevent disasters like this. Jake clenched his jaw. This wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. He stood up slowly, scanning the area for any signs of the saboteur. Whoever had done this might still be nearby, watching. Or worse, they might have planted additional traps to ensure the fire spread uncontrollably. Jake tightened his grip on the extinguisher strapped to his side. He couldn't let his guard down, not for a second. The heat was becoming unbearable now, pressing against him like a physical force. His suit's cooling system whirred loudly, struggling to keep up. A warning light flashed on his visor, alerting him that the oxygen supply was running low. He checked the gauge and grimaced. He had maybe 20 minutes left before he'd need to retreat or risk suffocating. Despite the mounting challenges, Jake pressed on. He knew he couldn't give up. Not yet. Too many lives depended on him. As he moved deeper into the inferno, he reminded himself of the faces he'd seen outside, the frightened families, the frozen firefighters, the hopeful eyes of Lyra and Mia. They were counting on him. And no matter what happened next, he wouldn't let them down. With renewed determination, Jake stepped forward, ready to face whatever came his way. Jake pushed forward, his mind racing as he processed the information from the control panel. Someone had tampered with the reactor, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The realization sent a chill down his spine, even in the sweltering heat of the inferno. This wasn't just about stopping the fire anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind the sabotage and ensuring it didn't happen again. As he moved deeper into the reactor, Jake noticed more signs of interference. Wires hung loose from the walls, their ends charred and frayed. Strange tools lay scattered on the floor, tools that didn't belong to the station's maintenance crew. Whoever had done this had been thorough, disabling multiple systems to ensure the fire would spread unchecked. Jake's jaw tightened. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that someone, or something, was lurking in the shadows. Outside, Mia Harper continued to piece together clues from interviews with survivors. She had spoken to several workers who claimed they'd seen unfamiliar figures near the reactor in the days leading up to the fire. One alien mechanic mentioned spotting a cloaked individual carrying an unusual device, but when he tried to approach, the figure vanished. Another worker described hearing strange noises coming from the reactor late at night, sounds that didn't match any of the usual machinery. Maya scribbled notes furiously in her notebook, her heart pounding with excitement and dread. The pieces were starting to come together, but the bigger picture was still unclear. Who would want to sabotage the reactor? And why go to such lengths to destroy it? Her thoughts turned to the political tensions simmering beneath the surface of the colony. Humans and aliens had always coexisted uneasily, their differences often leading to mistrust and conflict. Could this be part of a larger plot to drive humanity out of the galaxy? Lyra approached Mia, her green skin pale with worry. "Did you find anything?" she asked softly. Mia nodded. "Maybe. A few people reported seeing strangers near the reactor before the fire started. One of them mentioned a cloaked figure. Does that mean anything to you?" Lyra hesitated, her large eyes narrowing in thought. "There are rumors, whispers about a faction that opposes human expansion. They believe humans are too reckless, too dangerous to share space with other species. But I never thought they'd do something like this." Maya's stomach sank. If Lyra was right, then Jake wasn't just fighting a fire. He was walking straight into a trap set by extremists. She glanced at the monitor showing live footage from his helmet camera. Jake was moving cautiously now, his movements slower and more deliberate. The smoke around him thickened, obscuring much of the view, but Mia could see the tension in his posture. He knew something was wrong. Back inside the reactor, Jake spotted another anomaly, a small device attached to one of the support beams. It pulsed faintly, emitting a low hum that vibrated through the air. Jake recognized it immediately, a destabilizer. Whoever had planted it wanted to ensure the reactor collapsed entirely, taking the entire station with it. His heart raced as he realized the full extent of the sabotage. This wasn't just an attack. It was an assassination attempt on the entire colony. He reached for the device carefully, knowing that tampering with it could trigger an explosion. His hands trembled slightly as he examined it, searching for a way to disable it without causing further damage. Sweat dripped down his face, stinging his eyes, but he forced himself to focus. One wrong move, and everything would be over. Outside, the crowd grew restless. The monitor showed only glimpses of Jake's progress now, the smoke making it nearly impossible to see clearly. Whispers of doubt began to spread. Some wondered if Jake was still alive, while others speculated that he might have already failed. Lyra gripped Mia's arm tightly. "We need to trust him," she said firmly, though her voice wavered. "If anyone can stop this, it's Jake." Mia nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. She knew Jake was running out of time. His oxygen supply was dwindling, and the destabilizer added a new layer of danger to an already deadly situation. But she also knew that Jake wouldn't give up, not until he'd exhausted every option. Inside the reactor, Jake finally found what he was looking for, a manual override switch hidden beneath a panel on the destabilizer. He flipped it carefully, holding his breath as the device's pulsing slowed and eventually stopped. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the crackling of the flames. Then a loud hiss echoed through the chamber as the reactor's emergency cooling systems kicked in, dousing parts of the fire. Jake exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. But he knew the fight wasn't over yet. The fire was still raging, and the reactor was far from stable. With no time to waste, he pressed onward, determined to finish what he had started. The emergency cooling systems had slowed the fire, but Jake knew it wasn't enough. The reactor was still dangerously unstable, and the flames continued to roar in pockets throughout the chamber. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see or breathe, even with his suit's filters working overtime. His oxygen gauge blinked urgently now, showing less than 10 minutes of air left. Jake clenched his jaw. He couldn't afford to panic. Not now. For the first time since entering the inferno, doubt crept into his mind. He had managed to disable the destabilizer, but the damage to the reactor was extensive. Parts of the ceiling were beginning to collapse, sending chunks of metal crashing to the floor around him. The heat pressed against him like a living thing, relentless and suffocating. His muscles ached from the effort of moving through the chaos, and his vision blurred slightly as exhaustion set in. Was this really worth it? Could he actually save everyone, or was he just delaying the inevitable? Jake stopped for a moment, leaning against a partially melted beam to catch his breath. He closed his eyes behind his visor, trying to steady himself. Images flashed through his mind. Lyra's worried face, Mia's curious gaze, the frightened families huddled outside. They were counting on him. If he gave up now, all of them would die. But if he kept going, there was a chance, however slim, that he could pull them back from the brink of disaster. He shook his head, forcing the doubts away. No, he muttered under his breath. Not yet. With renewed determination, he pushed off the beam and moved forward again. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he refused to stop. He scanned the area, looking for anything that could help him contain the blaze. That's when he spotted it, a secondary control panel embedded in the wall, partially hidden by debris. Jake hurried toward it, brushing away chunks of charred metal and insulation. The panel was damaged but still functional, its screen flickering weakly. He connected his handheld scanner again, hoping it could decode the system quickly. Time was running out, and every second counted. As the device worked, Jake glanced over his shoulder at the flames. They seemed to grow angrier, surging closer as if they sensed his presence. He gritted his teeth and focused on the task at hand. Outside, the crowd watched anxiously as the monitors displayed Jake's progress, or lack thereof. The smoke made it difficult to see clearly, but they could tell he was struggling. Some people covered their mouths with their hands, while others whispered prayers or curses. Lyra stood near the front, her large eyes fixed on the screen. She flinched every time the camera shook or the flames roared louder. Beside her, Maya scribbled notes furiously, though her hands trembled slightly. "He's not giving up," Maya said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Even now, he's still fighting." Lyra nodded, though tears streamed down her cheeks. "Humans are strange," she admitted. "So fragile, yet so strong. I don't understand how he keeps going." Mia didn't answer. She didn't fully understand it either, but she admired Jake's courage. It wasn't recklessness driving him. It was something deeper, something unshakable. Whatever it was, it inspired her. Back inside the reactor, Jake's scanner beeped softly, signaling that it had finished decoding the control panel. He squinted at the translated text, which revealed instructions for activating the manual override system. It was risky. The process required him to stay in one place for several minutes, but it was the only way to stabilize the reactor completely. Jake took a deep breath and began inputting the commands, his fingers trembling slightly from fatigue. The fire raged around him, growing louder and more aggressive. Sparks flew, and the ground shook beneath his feet. Jake ignored it all, focusing solely on the task. The countdown on the control panel ticked downward. 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. Finally, with a loud hiss, the reactor systems engaged, flooding the chamber with coolant. The flames sputtered and died, leaving behind a smoky haze and an eerie silence. Jake slumped against the wall, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. For a moment, he simply sat there, letting the relief wash over him. He had done it. The fire was out, and the reactor was stable. For now. But the victory was bittersweet. The structural integrity of the chamber was severely compromised, and someone would need to manually reinforce the core to prevent a meltdown. Jake knew what that meant. Someone would have to stay behind. He glanced at his oxygen gauge. Less than 5 minutes left. There was no time to escape. Slowly, Jake stood up and walked toward the core, his steps heavy but resolute. Outside, the crowd erupted into cheers as alarms signaled the containment of the fire. But Jake didn't hear them. His focus was on the task ahead, and the sacrifice he was about to make. Jake reached the core of the reactor, his breath coming in shallow gasps as his oxygen supply dwindled. The chamber was eerily quiet now, save for the faint hum of the cooling systems and the occasional creak of metal settling after the intense heat. Smoke still lingered in the air, making it hard to see clearly. But Jake didn't need his eyes to know what had to be done. He glanced at the damaged core, its glowing surface flickering weakly. It was stable, for now. But without reinforcement, it would fail within hours, triggering a meltdown that would destroy the entire station. He pulled out a toolkit from his belt and began working quickly, his hands steady despite the exhaustion weighing down his body. Every movement felt deliberate, every action calculated. He knew this task would take time he didn't have. His oxygen gauge blinked urgently, showing less than 3 minutes remaining. Still, he pressed on, refusing to let fear or doubt slow him down. As he worked, a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. Jake froze, his heart pounding. He turned slowly, gripping a wrench tightly in one hand. Through the haze of smoke, a figure emerged, a tall alien with pale blue skin and sharp, angular features. The stranger wore a tattered cloak and carried a small device in his hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jake's mind raced. Was this the saboteur? Had he come back to finish the job? "Who are you?" Jake demanded, his voice firm despite the tension in the air. The alien hesitated, then lowered the device slightly. "My name is Kel," he said, his voice low and strained. I was hired to disable the safety systems, but I didn't mean for it to go this far." Jake stared at him, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You didn't mean for it to go this far," he repeated, incredulous. "You almost killed everyone on this station." Cale flinched, shame written across his face. "I had no choice," he admitted. "They threatened my family. If I didn't do what they asked, they would have been killed." Jake clenched his fists, torn between rage and pity. He wanted to confront Cale, to demand answers about who was behind the sabotage. But there was no time for that. The core was still unstable, and every second counted. "Help me," Jake said finally, his tone softening. "If you want to make this right, help me stabilize the reactor." Cale hesitated, his eyes darting between Jake and the damaged core. Finally, he nodded and stepped forward. Together, they worked side by side, combining their knowledge of human and alien technology to reinforce the core. Cale's hands moved deftly, repairing components that Jake couldn't have fixed alone. Despite their differences, they fell into an unspoken rhythm, each trusting the other to do their part. Outside, the crowd erupted into cheers as alarms signaled the successful containment of the fire. Back near the monitors, Mia Harper watched anxiously, her camera forgotten in her hands. Something about the footage felt off. The angle was strange, and the movements were too coordinated for one person. She leaned closer, squinting at the screen. That's when she noticed it. A second figure moving alongside Jake. Who was that? Lyra stood beside her, equally puzzled. "Is that another person?" she asked softly. "It looks like it," Maya replied, her brow furrowing. "But why would someone be helping him?" Before either of them could speculate further, the monitors went dark. The connection to Jake's helmet camera had been lost, leaving everyone outside in suspense. Whispers spread through the crowd, some hopeful, others fearful. No one knew what was happening inside the reactor, or if Jake was even still alive. Back inside, Jake and Cale finished reinforcing the core just as Jake's oxygen gauge hit 0. He slumped against the wall, his chest heaving as he struggled to breathe. Cale quickly handed him a portable oxygen canister, which Jake accepted gratefully. For a moment, they simply sat there, catching their breath. "You didn't have to help me," Jake said finally, breaking the silence. "Yes, I did," Cale replied, his voice heavy with regret. "This is my fault. I owe you, and everyone here, an apology." Jake nodded slowly, accepting the gesture. "We'll deal with that later. Right now, we need to get out of here." Together, they stood up and began making their way back toward the exit. The reactor was stable, but the structure was still compromised, and parts of the ceiling continued to collapse around them. Each step felt like a gamble, but they pushed forward, driven by the hope of survival. As they neared the doorway, Jake glanced back at the core one last time. It glowed faintly, a reminder of the disaster they had narrowly avoided. He didn't know what awaited them outside, or how the colony would react to Cale's involvement. But for now, they had bought themselves some time. And sometimes, that was enough. Jake and Cale emerged from the reactor chamber, blinking against the bright lights of the main corridor. The contrast was sharp. The inferno they had just escaped felt like another world compared to the relative calm outside. Smoke still lingered in the air, but the worst of the danger had passed. Around them, the crowd erupted into cheers, their relief palpable. For a moment, Jake allowed himself to feel it too, a fleeting sense of victory after hours of relentless struggle. But the celebration was short-lived. As soon as people noticed Cale walking beside Jake, murmurs spread through the crowd. Some stepped back, their faces filled with suspicion. Others whispered angrily, pointing at the alien in the tattered cloak. It didn't take long for someone to shout, "Is that the one who caused this?" Cale flinched, his pale blue skin turning even paler under the harsh glare of the emergency lights. He lowered his head, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Jake instinctively moved closer to him, shielding him slightly with his body. "He helped me stop the fire," Jake said loudly, his voice cutting through the growing tension. "Without him, we wouldn't have made it." The crowd fell silent, unsure how to respond. Lyra pushed her way to the front, her green skin shimmering faintly as she approached. Her large eyes locked onto Cale's face, searching for something. Guilt, remorse, truth. "Is this true?" she asked softly. "Did you help Jake?" Cale nodded slowly, his hands trembling at his sides. I did what I could to fix my mistake," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make things right." Mia Harper stood nearby, her camera raised hesitantly. She had been ready to document everything, the heroics, the aftermath. But now she hesitated. This wasn't just a story about bravery anymore. It was about guilt, redemption, and the fragile trust between species. She lowered the camera slightly, deciding to observe instead of record. Lyra turned to Jake, her expression softening. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Then she looked at Cale, her gaze steady. "You'll need to explain yourself, to all of us. But if Jake trusts you, then maybe there's hope." Cale swallowed hard, nodding again. "I'll tell you everything," he promised. "About who hired me, why they wanted the reactor destroyed, everything." As the crowd began to disperse, some reluctantly accepting Cale's presence while others remained wary, Jake felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. His suit was scorched and battered, his muscles ached from hours of effort, and his mind was heavy with everything that had happened. But he knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The structural damage to the reactor meant the station was still vulnerable, and whoever had orchestrated the sabotage might try again. Later that evening, Jake sat alone in a quiet corner of the medical bay, recovering from minor injuries sustained during the fire. Maya found him there, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. She hesitated before speaking, unsure how to approach him. Finally, She cleared her throat. "Can I ask you something?" Jake glanced up, his blue eyes tired but kind. "Sure," he said with a small smile. "Why did you trust him?" Maya asked, nodding toward Cole, who was being questioned by authorities in another room. "After everything he did, why give him a chance?" Jake leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully before answering. "Because everyone deserves a chance to make things right," he said finally. "And because holding on to anger won't fix anything. If we're going to survive out here, we need to work together, even with those who've made mistakes." Mia nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. There was wisdom in what he said, though it wasn't easy to accept. Still, she couldn't help but admire him, not just for his bravery, but for his willingness to see the good in others, even when it was hard. As the night wore on, plans were made to repair the reactor fully and strengthen its defenses against future attacks. Cal cooperated fully, revealing everything he knew about the faction that had coerced him. Though mistrust lingered among some, others began to see his actions as a step toward reconciliation. And through it all, Jake remained steadfast, his courage inspiring those around him to believe in the possibility of unity, even in the face of fear and division. The days following the fire were a blur of activity on the station. Engineers and technicians worked tirelessly to repair the damaged reactor, their movements hurried but precise. The colony's leaders held emergency meetings to discuss the sabotage and how to prevent similar attacks in the future. Tensions remained high, with many residents still suspicious of Kale and fearful of the faction he had revealed. But amidst the chaos, there was also a growing sense of unity. People from different species came together, sharing resources and ideas to rebuild what had been lost. Jake spent most of his time helping with the repairs. Despite his injuries, his presence seemed to calm those around him, offering reassurance that things would get better. Lyra often joined him, her technical expertise proving invaluable in stabilizing the reactor systems. Together, they formed an unlikely team, human and alien, firefighter and engineer, working side by side for the good of everyone. Kale, meanwhile, faced a mix of reactions. Some treated him with hostility, glaring at him whenever he walked by or refusing to speak to him. Others, inspired by Jake's willingness to forgive, gave him a chance, listening as he explained his role in the sabotage and expressed his remorse. Slowly, painfully, Kale began to earn back some measure of trust. He threw himself into the repair efforts, working long hours without complaint, determined to prove that he truly wanted to make amends. Mia Harper documented it all, capturing moments of cooperation and conflict alike. She interviewed survivors, firefighters, engineers, and even Kale himself, piecing together a story that went beyond the fire. Her article, titled "Everyone Froze in Terror, Except the Human Firefighter," became a galactic sensation when it was published. It highlighted not just Jake's bravery, but the resilience of the entire colony in the face of disaster. Readers across the galaxy were moved by the tale of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. But even as life on the station began to return to normal, the memory of Jake's ultimate sacrifice loomed large. Though he had survived the fire, his actions inside the reactor had exposed him to dangerous levels of radiation. Doctors warned him that the effects might not show up immediately, but they were inevitable. Jake took the news calmly, without anger or regret. "I knew the risks when I went in," he said simply, "and if I had to do it again, I would." His words resonated deeply with those who heard them. Even aliens who had once doubted humans now spoke of Jake with respect, calling him a true hero. A memorial was planned in his honor, a statue near the repaired reactor, holding a perpetual flame fueled by the very energy source he had saved. It was meant to symbolize hope, courage, and the enduring spirit of humanity. On the day of the unveiling, the entire colony gathered to pay their respects. Aliens of all shapes and sizes stood alongside humans, united in gratitude and admiration. Jake watched quietly from the sidelines, leaning against a railing as speeches were given and tears were shed. When it came time for him to speak, he stepped forward hesitantly, unsure of what to say. "I'm no hero," he began, his voice steady but humble. "I just did what anyone else would have done. We're stronger together than we are apart. That's something I've learned here. And if my actions remind us of that, then maybe it was worth it." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the station. For a moment, Jake allowed himself to feel proud, not of what he had done alone, but of what they had achieved together. As the ceremony ended and people began to disperse, Mia approached him, her camera slung over her shoulder. "You know," she said with a smile, "you changed something here. Something big." Jake shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe. Or maybe I just reminded everyone of something they already knew, that we're all in this together." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the bustling crowd. Behind him, the eternal flame flickered softly, casting a warm glow over the faces of those who remained. It was a reminder of the past, yes, but also a beacon of hope for the future. In the weeks that followed, the colony underwent a transformation. The fire had left scars, not just on the station itself, but on the people who called it home. Yet from those scars came growth. Conversations about trust, unity, and cooperation became more common. Aliens and humans, once divided by fear and mistrust, began to work together in ways they never had before. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, moments of tension, but there was progress. And at the heart of it all was Jake Miller. Jake continued to play a key role in rebuilding the station, though his health began to decline. The radiation exposure had weakened him, leaving him fatigued and prone to coughing fits. He tried to hide it, pushing through the pain with quiet determination, but those closest to him noticed. Lyra, in particular, grew increasingly worried. "You need to rest," she told him one day as they worked on reinforcing the reactor's outer walls. "You've done enough." Jake shook his head, smiling faintly. "There's always more to do," he replied. "Besides, I'm fine." But he wasn't fine, and everyone knew it. Still, no one stopped him. They admired his resilience too much to argue. Instead, they rallied around him, making sure he didn't overexert himself, while quietly taking on extra tasks to ease his burden. Kale, too, remained deeply involved in the recovery efforts. He had become something of an outcast among his own kind for cooperating with humans, but he didn't seem to mind. His guilt over the sabotage still weighed heavily on him, but helping repair the damage gave him a sense of purpose. Whenever he struggled, Jake was there to encourage him. "You're doing good work," Jake would say. "That's what matters now." Mia Harper stayed on the station longer than she had planned, continuing to document the changes happening around her. Her article had sparked conversations across the galaxy, drawing attention not just to Jake's heroism, but to the broader issues facing human-alien relations. She interviewed dozens of residents, capturing their thoughts and feelings about the disaster and its aftermath. Many spoke of how Jake's actions had inspired them to rethink old prejudices and embrace collaboration. One evening, Maya found herself sitting with Jake in the station's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The view was breathtaking, a vast expanse of light and color stretching endlessly into the unknown. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You ever think about leaving?" Maya asked finally, breaking the silence. "Going somewhere quieter, somewhere safe?" Jake chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Not really. This place has kind of grown on me," he said, gesturing vaguely at the bustling colony below. "Besides, where else would I go?" Mia smiled, though her expression was tinged with sadness. She knew Jake's time was limited, and it pained her to see someone so selfless facing such an unfair fate. "You've already given so much," she said quietly. "More than anyone could ask for." Jake shrugged, his gaze fixed on the stars. "It's not about giving or taking. It's about doing what's right. If I can help make this place better, even just a little, then it's worth it." His words stayed with Mia long after their conversation ended. She realized that Jake's legacy wasn't just about stopping a fire or saving lives. It was about showing others what was possible when people put aside their differences and worked toward a common goal. His courage had ignited something far greater than he could have imagined, a movement toward unity and understanding. As the months passed, the colony flourished. New alliances were formed, trade routes expanded, and projects aimed at improving life for everyone gained momentum. The memorial statue of Jake stood tall near the reactor, its flame burning brightly as a constant reminder of his sacrifice. Visitors from other colonies and planets came to see it, paying their respects and learning about the man who had risked everything to save strangers. And through it all, Jake remained humble, deflecting praise and focusing instead on the work that needed to be done. Though his strength waned, his spirit burned brighter than ever, inspiring those around him to keep moving forward, to build a future where fear and division had no place. Years had passed since the fire that nearly destroyed the colony, but its impact was still felt every day. The station thrived now, a shining example of what could be achieved when different species worked together. New buildings rose from the ashes of the old, their designs blending human and alien architecture in ways that symbolized unity. Trade flourished, friendships formed, and tensions eased as trust grew stronger. At the center of it all stood the memorial, a statue of Jake Miller with an eternal flame burning brightly at its base. The flame was powered by energy from the very reactor Jake had saved, a fitting tribute to his bravery and sacrifice. It served as more than just a reminder of the past. It was a beacon of hope, a promise that even in the darkest moments, courage and kindness could light the way forward. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it, some leaving flowers or tokens of gratitude at its base. Others simply stood there, gazing at the flickering light, lost in thought. Kale returned often too. He had dedicated his life to promoting peace between humans and aliens, using his experience to advocate for cooperation and understanding. Though he still carried the weight of his past actions, he found solace in knowing he had helped repair the damage he caused. On quiet evenings, he would sit near the statue, reflecting on how much had changed, and how one man's decision to step into the flames had altered the course of history. Mia Harper visited less frequently, her career taking her to distant corners of the galaxy. But she never forgot the story that had defined her early years as a journalist. Her article about Jake remained one of her proudest works, inspiring countless others to believe in the power of unity. When she did return, she always made time to visit the memorial, standing silently before the flame as memories flooded back. Jake's humility and courage had left an indelible mark on her, shaping not only her writing, but also her view of the universe. Lyra, now one of the station's lead engineers, ensured the reactor ran smoothly, implementing safeguards to prevent another disaster. She thought of Jake often, especially during challenging projects. His determination and optimism stayed with her, guiding her through tough decisions and reminding her why their work mattered. Sometimes she brought her apprentices to the memorial, sharing stories of the firefighter who had taught them all what it meant to stand up for what was right. As for Jake, he eventually succumbed to the effects of radiation exposure, passing away peacefully surrounded by friends and allies. His death was mourned deeply, but his legacy lived on, not just in the memorial or the thriving colony, but in the hearts of those he had touched. People spoke of him fondly, remembering not only his heroism, but also his kindness and unwavering belief in the goodness of others. One day, a young girl visiting the station with her family stopped in front of the statue. She looked up at Jake's likeness, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Who was he?" she asked her mother. Her mother smiled, kneeling beside her. "He was a firefighter who saved this whole place," she explained. "But more than that, he showed everyone here that we're stronger when we stick together." The girl nodded slowly, then placed a small flower at the base of the statue before running off to join her siblings. As the family walked away, the flame continued to burn, steady and bright, casting its warm glow over the faces of those who passed by. It was a simple flame, yet it carried so much meaning. It represented sacrifice, hope, and the enduring bond between beings from different worlds. And though Jake Miller was gone, his spirit lingered. In the laughter of children playing in the streets, in the hum of machinery keeping the station alive, and in the shared dreams of a united future. For as long as the flame burned, Jake's story would continue to inspire, and in a universe filled with uncertainty, that was something worth holding on to.